It's always a fun conversation trying to determine who the next big movie stars in Hollywood are gonna be. But that term movie star doesn't mean the same thing that it used to in Hollywood. And whenever I think about the modern movie star, I always think back at this quote that Captain America himself, Anthony Mackie, said.
Like, Anthony Mackie isn't a movie star. The Falcon is a movie star. And that's what's weird. It used to be with Tom Cruise and Will Smith and Stallone and Schwarzenegger. When you went to the movies, you went to go see the Stallone movie. You went to go see the Schwarzenegger movie. Now you go see X-Men. So the evolution of the superhero has meant the death of the movie star.
In order to understand exactly what Anthony Mackie is talking about here, we need to look back at the history of the movie star throughout Hollywood. Movie stars have always shaped the world of movie going. Even back when there were silent films, people were going to see certain big actors like Charlie Chaplin. I mean, who could care less what the movie was about as long as you had Chaplin dressing up in his silly costumes and doing his goofy stunts. They were people who often brought an incredibly charismatic personality and a connection with the audience. Because they were so powerful in bringing audiences into theaters, they could often have a say on matters like the script, the production, the hiring of other people. They could act as a mini producer of sorts. People like Humphrey Bogart, Cary Grant, Jimmy Stewart, Katharine Hepburn, these were the big people that attracted audiences back in the day because they were incredibly charismatic and they brought personalities with them. I mean, often an audience member wouldn't care as much what Audrey Hepburn was going to be doing in this movie. They would just care that they were seeing this amazing actor that they loved and admired on the screen. These early movie stars shaped the way we see the earlier films even today. And once to the beginning of these big action blockbusters, we were seeing lots of movie stars take command, such as Clint Eastwood, John Wayne, Steve McQueen. And in the 1970s, we started to see a lot of these film stars who are still prominent until today or recently, like Robert De Niro, Jack Nicholson, and Al Pacino. And well into the end of the 20th century, we still saw movie stars being formed who are still powerful today. People like Tom Hanks, Denzel Washington, Julia Roberts, George Clooney, Brad Pitt. Their mere presence brings comfort to millions of audiences, and you could watch a movie just based on their name being listed in the credits. And they could sell tickets to audiences just based on them being on the poster. The 2010s is often cited with the fizzling out of the movie star because of Hollywood's obsession with risk aversion and its embracing of franchises. Like Anthony Mackie says, the IP becomes the star. Back in the day, people would see a movie like Cobra or Last Action Hero just because it was Stallone or Schwarzenegger doing their cool thing. These days, the big theatrical films that are greenlit are watched because they're a recognizable IP. Alien, Batman, Jurassic World, Despicable Me, Fast and Furious, Deadpool, etc. And with that, the idea of the A-list actor, an actor whose very name can guarantee box office returns, has started to dwindle because people base their selection of movies on a franchise or an event rather than simply an actor. But I want to explore this idea in a little more nuance because that's not to say a name like Brad Pitt is completely powerless. Julia Roberts herself has commented about this industry shift away from the idea of movie stars. She says, "The business has changed entirely. When I started, I felt like you did a movie and if it did well, you might get offered a couple of other movies and might have more choice and you'd get paid a little bit more on the next one. There were incremental shifts in opportunity and it made more sense. Now it's made more of air. Maybe it doesn't feel as sturdy when you're going along. I felt pretty sure-footed about the choices I was making. You don't have those incremental markers anymore, it doesn't seem like." Many people you'll talk to often cite Tom Cruise as the last of these traditional A-list actors, a name who alone warrants the theatrical experience for the majority of viewers. And look at how much creative control the guy has over his productions. But to be fair, it's also been a number of years since he's done a movie that wasn't attached to a big franchise of his like Top Gun or Mission Impossible. But he's already been generating hype around his new contract with Warner Brothers to make original movies, and this alleged space movie that he wants to do with Doug Liman. So I think there is still a lot of hype around Tom Cruise's name alone, specifically with his big scale action films. Movie stars like Jennifer Lawrence or Christian Bale or Margot Robbie or Ryan Reynolds still have a lot of power when it comes to a production or a marketing campaign. but they're no longer guarantees at the box office like the traditional movie stars decades ago were. After Red Sparrow bombed at the box office in 2018, The Hollywood Reporter published a really interesting read of an article called "If Jennifer Lawrence Can't Open a Movie, Who Can?" And I want to read you a quote that I really like from this article that I think beautifully characterizes the transcendent nature of a movie star. Most stars aren't stars, they're really actors, because the person they're playing isn't them. Gary Oldman's a perfectly pleasant human being, but God knows he isn't Churchill any more than he was Sid Vicious. Real stars like Jennifer Lawrence are different. They may happen to be good actors, but that's not their essential ingredient. Through some mysterious alchemy that no one's ever quite explained, they allow us to identify in a heightened way with a complete stranger. They allow us to see the world more intimately and empathetically than we would ever on our own. The idea here is that movie stars still have a lot of power, but not the same that it used to be. They can't greenlight original movies based on their star power alone as easily. Their name alone can't guarantee that a movie will be a hit in theaters. But something that happened a little earlier this year gave me a bit of hope when it comes to this idea of the A-list movie star and its future. Because before recently, there wasn't anyone since the 1970s to star in 2 of the top domestic grossing films in less than 8 months. The last one was John Travolta for Grease and Saturday Night Fever, but someone recently reached that feat again, a young man by the name of Timothee Chalamet. And those 2 films were Wonka and Dune Part 2, which both had immense success at the box office and even surpassed expectations. And this led to Mr. Chalamet signing a multi-million-dollar film deal with Warner Brothers, which distributed both of those films. And this has me really excited for the guy and really curious to see what these movies are going to be. And this is the first time in a while that we've seen a major top studio like Warner Brothers openly invest in a movie star being the centerpiece in their films, especially a studio like Warner Brothers that's been known for being so risk-averse recently that they even end up destroying the creative merit of their own IP-driven movies. But the fact that they're prioritizing Chalamet as the movie star and the centerpiece of the film has me really interested as to what's going to happen here and who's going to be the next person to do this as well. And obviously Wonka and Dune Part 2 are both from franchises and IPs. I'm not gonna act like Bones and All made a ton of money and Call Me By Your Name didn't get a lot of boost from Oscar nominations. So we'll have to wait and see if a complete unknown, Chalamet's Bob Dylan biopic, does well enough for us to feel confident that Chalamet is bringing forth this rebirth of the A-list movie star. But who else is gonna join him in this list? I'm gonna go back to another Hollywood Reporter article that really excited me, which talks about 10 actors who have A-list potential. And Chalamet is included on the list, but I want to go through the rest of them and give my thoughts as to whether these actors hold A-list power in the next couple of years of Hollywood. First up, we got Austin Butler, who has been around for a long time. He was even in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but I think he really became a household name, at least for most people, when he was Elvis, which was a huge success at the box office. Obviously, he was in Dune since then, and I think he's not only on the minds of Hollywood and the casting directors, but audiences have really noticed him. There's a lot of people who I'm sure would watch him in anything after Elvis, and I think he very much has potential to lead a lot more things. He's incredibly charismatic. He's got like a James Dean sort of factor to him, of like this young rebelliousness, but I think he's got a lot of potential to take big dramas or genre films and get them even more popularity in the next couple years. Next up is Jacob Elordi, who I think is a little more popular with the younger audiences, but still is very much one to look out for. Jacob Elordi most significantly earned his fame from The Kissing Booth and Euphoria, but most recently was big in Saltburn and Priscilla. What he lacks in box office numbers so far, he certainly makes up for with popularity with the younger audiences. I don't think he's gonna become a household name right away, but he's also taking a lot of risks with the projects he signs on to, which I really admire. But I'd like to see him headline some mainstream films, maybe some romance movies, and see if maybe that can attract him a lot of fame. Next up is Paul Mescal. He doesn't have the same number of acclaimed projects as these other people, but a very important lesson here is quality over quantity. After Sun was his first lead film credit, and he got an Oscar nomination for it at age 26, not to mention an Emmy nomination for the beautiful show Normal People, and he's already snatching a lot of projects starting with Gladiator 2, and I think after Gladiator 2, he's going to be a huge name, not just for film lovers, but for mainstream audiences as well. He has that it factor, he has that charisma, he has a very dramatic and vulnerable edge to him, and I think he's going to show that with his versatility and his personality, he's going to become a huge A-lister. I think he has that direct potential very soon as well. Next up is Jenna Ortega. She did a lot on Disney Channel before joining the Scream franchise and now headlines the very successful Wednesday. I think she's already a household name of sorts, but I don't think Hollywood has given her as many top billed roles yet as I'd like to see in order to say, yeah, she's an A-lister. I think she will get that in the next couple of years, but I've also seen her in a lot of supporting roles in really indie movies like Miller's Girl with Martin Freeman, which I heard wasn't very good. But I think the moment Jenna Ortega takes on big studio projects, especially as the lead, I think she'll absolutely see a lot of success. Next up is Glen Powell, who I think is very much here to stay and has had a lot of success in the last year or so with Anyone But You, Hitman, and Twister. He has that leading man charisma and personality. I think he's going to continue being in big hits, even if he wasn't like the main thing that made Twisters a box office success. I think he could easily headline some big theatrical films in the future. After that is Florence Pugh, who was nominated for an Oscar for Little Women, is in the Marvel Universe starting with Black Widow, and was most recently in Dune Part 2 as well. Florence Pugh is someone who I think will absolutely be an A-lister. I think in the couple years that she's been famous, she's managed to establish herself in all kinds of movies, whether it's headlining Marvel's upcoming Thunderbolts, and now that she's been in these big awards movies like Little Women and Oppenheimer, I'm interested in whether with a movie like We Live in Time, she and Andrew Garfield and their chemistry could be something that attracts a lot of modern audiences. Not to mention her thrillers have done great at the box office, like Midsummer and Don't Worry Darling. I think if she continues down that genre, she'll be in a lot more successful movies. Next up is Sydney Sweeney, who started her fame with Euphoria and The White Lotus, and was then in films like Anyone But You, Immaculate, and the upcoming Eden. I think she's going to be taking on a variety of projects, and I don't know if all of them are going to become box office successes just because she's the one leading it, at least not in the next few years. But she also has a big audience from stuff like Anyone But You, and if she started something similar, I think she would definitely get a lot of success from something like that. And after that is Anya Taylor-Joy. She's been rather popular with movie lovers. Movies like Split, Glass, and The Menu have made a lot at the box office, which are movies that she headlined. And if you want to count the Super Mario Bros. Movie, it's one of the highest grossing movies of all time. But she's also been in a couple movies that weren't as successful, like Last Night in Soho and The Northman, which both should have done much better. And even Furiosa, which is set in the Mad Max universe, ended up bombing. But I think there's a lot more potential for her movies in the future, especially because of her celebrity status and her massive success with something like The Queen's Gambit. Perhaps marketing her as the star and making it a genre film or a thriller like The Witch or Split or The Menu would bring her another big successful movie soon. And last is Zendaya, who is the other case of someone who's already become an A-lister in a very unique sense. Almost all of her theatrical films have seen huge success at the box office, whether Spider-Man, The Greatest Showman, the Dune films, or even Smallfoot. But I think Zendaya has permanently secured her success as an A-list actor because she already took this fandom from Disney Channel and from Marvel, and then right away proved that she was a serious actor with Euphoria. And we just saw a film like Challengers make almost $100 million based on her name as a huge selling factor. But there's plenty of actors who I didn't mention today that may propel a movie to box office success sooner rather than later. And the power of social media with movie stars and mediated personalities is something that's very unpredictable and may help movies in its own way too. So let me know if there's anyone I missed, anything you particularly agree with, any movie star you'd like to see perhaps make a comeback soon, and of course, stay tuned for more here on the channel.